Well, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to Connecting the Dots webinar series. It's hard to believe today is our final session. My name is Melissa Griffin, and I am the Technical Assistance Coordinator for South Carolina Partnerships for Inclusion. Today, we're going to focus on Indicator 12, Early Childhood Transitions. We will take a deep dive into specifics of Indicator 12, the Part C to Part B transition process, and how utilizing DEC recommended practices in our classrooms and schools can have a direct and positive impact on South Carolina's ability to ensure a smooth and effective transition process, as well as meet SPP and APR targets. So let's get this ball, or should I say dot, rolling. In the chat box, please add your name, role, and district or location. Here is our agenda for our time together this afternoon. I have just a few housekeeping items before we get started. So today's webinar is being recorded. We'll make it available on our YouTube page so that you may revisit the information or share it with some of your colleagues. We do have closed captioning available by clicking on the CC button in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. Comments and questions are welcome throughout the webinar. If you think of a question at any point, you may add it to the Q&A box on your screen. Our panelists will address your questions during or at the end of the webinar. And please be sure to complete the evaluation at the end of the webinar. Your feedback helps us to ensure that we're delivering high quality and effective technical assistance. Okay, so life is full of transitions, right? Everybody we know has been through some sort of transition at some point in their life. So when you think about early childhood transition, what comes to mind? On your screen, you'll see several images, and just take a minute and choose the one that most accurately, can't talk, reflects your perspective on early childhood transitions. Just a hint, there's no right answer. Oops, sorry, let me get that voting piece up there. Where is it at? Woo. Sorry, guys. If you go up to the top and go to menti.com and use the code 93660682, you'll be able to access that. It's not wanting to show me the link here. I apologize. Okay, we have one answer coming in. Anybody else? Oh, butterfly, that's my favorite. Well, I'm happy to see this. Those are more streamlined transitions versus a big long leap. Okay. Okay, so how many of you are familiar with the SPP APR? You can use the chat to respond, or you can raise your hand. I want to take a minute and talk about what these are and the purpose that they serve. So SPP stands for State Performance Plan. It must be completed by each state receiving funds to implement IDEA every 6 years, and it includes a detailed plan of how the state would like to provide these services. The SPP also contains both compliance and indicators and performance indicators of success. So compliance indicator targets are set by the Office of Special Education Programs, or OSEP, and performance indicator targets are set by the state. In the APR, that stands for Annual Performance Report, and that is an annual report dedicated to evaluate the progress that has been made within that state towards appropriately implementing IDEA services. Both the SPP and the APR rely on data collected throughout the year, including some IDEA Section 618 data, such as the number of children served, the educational environments or settings in which the child receives services. So early childhood transitions is indicator 12, and that is the percentage of children referred by Part C prior to age 3 who are found eligible for Part B and who have an IEP developed and implemented by their 3rd birthday. What is transition? Oh, my slides are jumping on me. Give me 1 second here and get back. There we go. So what is transition? For our purposes today, transition refers to the events, activities, and processes associated with key changes between environments or programs. Some key transition points would be from the hospital to home, from early intervention to Part B, and transition to kindergarten or school age programs. Now, the next slide is pretty text heavy, but I wanted you all to see this because if you look at this, you can see that transition is not a one and done process, right? It spans over the course of the entire 2nd year of life. And it's actually an indicator in which, or a process in which both Part C and Part B need to work together. So if you look at this, you can see that both have indicators identified or related to transition. And so the kind of peachy color here, those are Part C indicators, and the blue boxes of information are Part B indicators. And this is in our references and on a resource sheet further down in the presentation, so you'll have access to that. So that's a lot, right? That's a big maze of information. So we want to break it down. And I fell in love with this guy because he dances kind of like me these days, and he can do a little bit and then it's over. So we're going to go through each step and talk about those individually. Okay. So the first is transition notification. And that process starts on the child's 2nd birthday or 24 months of age. What that is directory information for children eligible for Part C services and that are potentially eligible for Part B services. Such information that is directory information defined as FERPA includes child's name, parent's name, date of birth, address, telephone number. So just basic information. And there is no parental consent needed to transmit that information. Part C, state office, is responsible for making sure that those reports are sent each month to the Department of Education, as well as each LEA for active children with an IFSP. You can see, kids don't necessarily, although ideally, we would want them to come in and become eligible, immediately as soon as there's something identified as a disability or a possible developmental delay, but that doesn't always happen. So in order to keep those kiddos from falling through the cracks, that report is sent at regular intervals. So they'll send that at 24 months, over 24 months, 30 months, over 30 months, 33 months, and 34.5 months. And if there's no children that have come in and require a notification, they will send a 0 report. And that's just to say, we don't have any kids, not we forgot to send it, but we do not have any kids in that specific month. Okay, so that's transition notification, again, a Part C responsibility. On to transition referral. Transition referral is done at 24 to 33 months of age. It is sent as either a hard copy or an electronic copy of information. And you can see there's a breakdown. This one does require parental consent. and it can include information from the child's BabyNet record. So the early interventionist or service coordinator is responsible for sending that for children found eligible before 33 months of age. And so you can see this is broken down here. The intake coordinator is responsible for sending the transition referral form for kids found eligible between 33 and 34.5 months of age, getting that information to the LEA or community preschool provider. And then the central referral team, which is where all BabyNet referrals come in, they are the ones who will provide the family with information about school services if the child comes in between 34.5 and 36 months of age. So they will, there's no actual transition referral done in that situation. The family is provided with the information they need to reach out to the school district. Okay. Moving on is the transition conference. This is also a Part C responsibility. It's for potentially eligible children for Part B services that are currently Part C kiddos. Part C personnel is responsible for scheduling and facilitating the conference. Like I said, it's held between 27 and 33 months of age. It includes the service coordinator or EI and either the LEA or community preschool providers. It's to be held for all children determined eligible with an IFSP in place by 33 months of age. And parents are invited and encouraged to attend, but it is not required. So it's important to mention that this is a Part C indicator. So even if the LEA does not participate in this meeting, they will still hold this meeting in order to meet their requirements. That being said, the LEA should be invited to and attend all transition conferences. They can be done by telephone. They can be done face-to-face, virtually, in our Zoom world here. And it should include the parents, other family members, if requested by the parent, an advocate or a person, if the family requests that, a person who can is familiar with the child and share information about the child, the Part C personnel or service coordinator, the person involved in the evaluation and assessment, and the LEA or community preschool providers. If a child comes in after 33 months of age, they do not require a transition conference. Okay. All right, let's move on to our next step, because this does become Part B. So this is where the initial evaluation comes into play, and those are obviously completed by Part B 619 personnel after the transition conference and prior to the child's 3rd birthday. The evaluation and eligibility determination does require parental consent, and it has to be completed within 60 days of receiving that consent. Now, of course, things don't always go as planned, right? So there are some exceptions to that initial time frame. One being that the parent repeatedly fails or refuses to produce the child for the evaluation, so they miss their appointments, or if it's being done virtually, they don't bring the child to the virtual event. The child enrolls in a school of another public agency after transition timeline and prior to determination by the child's previous public agency. And that one gets a little sticky. So when it gets down to those individual situations, it's best to reach out and we can kind of talk through those. Okay, eligibility determination. So eligibility determination should draw upon information from a variety of sources, including aptitude and achievement tests, parent input, teacher recommendations, but you also want to include information about a child's physical condition, social or cultural background, and adaptive behavior, and make sure that all of the information obtained is carefully considered because we know all these pieces come into play with how well a child adapts to their new environment. And in order to be determined eligible, the child must meet the criteria for having a disability as defined by IDEA, and also that disability is determined to affect their learning. IEP development and implementation is kind of where our indicator 12 falls most effectively. The IEP must be developed within 30 days of eligibility determination and prior to the child's 3rd birthday. It also must be implemented prior to the child's 3rd birthday. So, you know, not only are we holding the IEP, it should be ready to roll. And that is what indicator 12 is all about. If a child turns 3 during the summer and the child does not require extended school year services, special education and related services may begin in the new school year. So as you can see, it's very important that the IEP is developed and implemented by the child's 3rd birthday. And that's a very involved process. And it requires collaboration between Part C and Part B to be successful. It's also important to note that SPP APR indicators surrounding transition happens for both Part C and Part B. Okay, so if you've been in this field or alive for that matter, you know that things are not always cut and dry, nor do they always go according to plan. So I love this statement. If plan A didn't work, the alphabet has 25 more letters, just stay cool. So let's talk about those late referrals to Part C and how it affects the transition process. Okay. So this is the kids that come into Part C and are made eligible between 31.5 months and 33 months. And when that happens, we would conduct the IEP meeting to develop the IEP within 30 days of eligibility determination, or sooner if the 30 days expires after the 3rd birthday. So that, I think, is an important piece to keep in mind. We want to consider the IFSP when developing the IEP and provide written prior notice and obtain parental consent for services. You want to implement the IEP by the child's 3rd birthday and include dates for initiation of special education and related services. And you'll see in different spots, I know reporting requirements, this would fall under B11 and B12A. Let's see. Next, we have those kids that come in between 33 months and 34.5 months. And for those kids, the transition conference is actually not required. You would conduct the IEP meeting to develop the IEP within 30 days of eligibility determination. Again, consider the IFSP, provide written prior notice and obtain parental consent. Make sure that that child's IEP is implemented by the child's 3rd birthday. And this one will fall in reporting requirements B11, B12A, and B12E. Moving on down the line, we're getting closer to that 3rd birthday. So this is for kids made eligible between 34.5 months and the child's 3rd birthday. And you would conduct the IEP meeting within 30 days of eligibility determination. Again, all the same steps considering the IFSP, implementing the IEP. The big thing to note with this one is that you would not report on B12. Okay, so, oops, slides don't want to stay. Come back. Okay. Indicator 12 is a compliance indicator. So remember, we talked about there's compliance indicators and there's performance indicators. When it's a compliance indicator, it is set by OSEP. And this one as with most compliance indicators, is set at 100%. So there's no wiggle room, right? Indicator 12 is 100%. This means that every single child who ages out of Part C services and is eligible for Part B 619 services must have an IEP developed and implemented by their 3rd birthday with little to no exception. There's very few valid reasons for delay, but they are up here. It would be if the parent revokes consent, because we need parent consent to proceed. If the parent does not bring the child for evaluation, that would be documented clearly in all the attempts. Or if Part C sends the referral late, then you'll have that as well. Things that I think are commonly seen or maybe misunderstood from what I understand is holidays, seasonal breaks, weekends, even COVID, or waiting on an outside evaluation such as hearing, vision, OT. Those are not valid reasons for delay. And as they are not, they will affect your total score and reaching that 100%. So you can kind of see why having strong professional relationships with Part C personnel and clear and timely processes in place is so important. Okay, indicator 12 rating determination. Y'all didn't know you were going to do math this late in the afternoon, right? Math is not my favorite either, but this is important information, so we're going to push forward. This is how they find the percentage in terms of indicator 12 being met. And so if you look at this, here is your calculation or equation, and each letter is reflected here. So A is the number of children who've been served in Part C and referred for Part B eligibility determination. So all the kiddos, right? B is those who are referred but determined not to be eligible prior to their 3rd birthdays. So we're going to take them out of the equation. C is those who are found eligible who have an IEP developed and implemented by their 3rd birthday. Those are the kids that meet the requirement. And then D is the number of children for whom parent refusal to provide consent caused delays in evaluation. So that is one of those valid exceptions that we talked about. E would be the number of children determined to be eligible for early intervention services less than 90 days, another one of the exceptions we talked about. And then F is parents who choose either to not proceed with school services or proceed with another type of program. So let's try it out. Here is the actual South Carolina SPP APR data for indicator 12 in 2020. So I'm going to give you just a couple minutes here. Take a minute, use the equation that we discussed to figure out South Carolina's percentage for meeting the indicator. And once you have your answer, just jot it down and we'll see if you got it correct. If you're feeling froggy, you can put your total in the chat.
I already messed up my calculation.
It takes a minute. It takes a minute. But if you sit there and you think about it, it actually will make sense. Okay. So let's see if you have reached the right total. So where do we stand in South Carolina? Well, if you did that calculation per the equation, you would end up with 52.69. Of course, that's 2020. How many of you got it correct? Can I see like hands? Can you tell me in the chat? How many of you got that correct?
I don't think
Nobody's brave enough. They're like, no, it's the afternoon. We're not doing all that. All right, that's fair. That's fair. So a long way to go. We have got a long way to go to 100, right, in 2020. But if you look at 2016 and 2017, you can see we hit it. So it's possible. We took a hit. Oops, see, there it goes again, jumping around. We took a hit because of COVID, and who didn't, right? But you can also see that for whatever reason, in 2018, we were pretty close. In 2019, it dropped considerably. So I'm not sure what happened in 2019, but we've fallen quite a bit at that point. So we need to figure out how we can do it right. We just need to make some adjustments, right? Next, you've got to put this information in so that OSEP can have it. And you guys use Enrich. So we wanted to have kind of a visual for you all. As you're entering the transition information into Enrich, you'll get a pop-up for a compliance check if it's late. And so you would enter a delay reason and a comment right here. There are codes that would correspond with that. And so let's take a look at those. You see the same thing that we saw before, right? The A, B, C, D, E. So down here, these codes are the valid reasons for delay with the exception of this last one, which is OL. And that is the number not met by the third birthday due to LEA failure to meet timeline. The ones before here, oh, Sherry, I didn't see that. That's awesome. We're back up to 95.5, guys. So we're getting there. That's a quick turnaround too. I'm happy. But if you look at these are the D, E, and F are the acceptable delay codes. And then OL would be a failure to meet that on behalf of the district. So let's take a quick minute to jump back to our Enrich screen so you can see what I'm talking about when I say that you would enter a code, which is a drop-down box right here, and then you can just put a comment for what happened there. It's kind of a quick explanation. Okay. All right. So now we've talked all about indicator 12. We've talked all about the requirements. So what can we do that's going to have a positive effect on how we meet that goal or how we meet those timelines? Who's familiar with DEC recommended practices? You're welcome to say in the chat, or just kind of raise a hand. The DEC recommended practices, just as a recap, were originally developed in 1991 to help guide the relatively new field of early intervention and early childhood special education. And the most recent version was created in 2014 as a collaborative effort between DEC, or the Division of Early Childhood, and ECTA, the Early Childhood Technical Assistance Center. So as we know, putting research into practice can present quite a few challenges, right? The purpose of the DEC recommended practices is to highlight those practices specifically known to promote the outcomes of young children who are at risk for developmental delays and disabilities, and support their families in accordance with the position statement from DEC and NAEYC. Okay. So let's connect the dots between indicator 12 and the DEC recommended practices. So you may remember us discussing topic areas in our first overview session. And when it comes to transition, there's practices in 4 of those topic areas that correlate directly to early childhood transitions. Those are leadership, assessment, family, and of course, transition. But how do they correlate? Let's explore the topic a little closer. But first, I want to tell you a story. So take a moment and get comfortable in your seat. We're going to hear about Olivia's transition story. Olivia was born at 31 weeks and she weighed 2 pounds, 11 ounces. She was teeny-tiny, as you can see in that left-hand side picture. She spent 5 weeks in the NICU until she was healthy enough to come home. And it felt like a roller coaster. Like it was up. One day she'd be doing great. The next day she would be fighting for her life. When the family was finally able to come home, their pediatrician connected them with the BabyNet program, where they were made eligible to receive EI services or early intervention services. And Olivia's been receiving those services along with OT and PT ever since. In that time, she and her parents have built a strong rapport with her early interventionist, who has had 2 years to get to know her and what learning styles and interventions are most effective for her personally. When she turned 2, her EI began talking with the family about the transition process. And Olivia's family was nervous. Their EI had been coming to their home weekly for the past 2 years to see her and got all her services set up for her. The parents were worried about how she would adapt to the new environment, her health as she would be exposed to so many germs, and if she would be scared to be away from them. There were so many things to think about. What if Olivia doesn't do well at school? Should we let her ride the school bus? Look how little she is. Would she cooperate with a new OT and PT? And would her teacher be understanding of her individual needs as an easily overstimulated preemie? The EI and the preschool transition coordinator have been communicating regularly since Olivia turned 2.5. And the EI has provided the most current developmental information, including input from the OT and PT with parental consent. Prior to the transition conference, the family received information from the district about their procedural safeguards, and they had time to look through it and prepare some questions. They were also given written prior notice of the day and time of the transition conference so that they could arrange their schedules to be able to attend. The EI worked to accommodate the preschool transition coordinator schedule and provided written prior notice to them as well. At the transition conference, the EI, family, and preschool transition coordinator met to discuss preschool services and share information with the family about what they can expect. The EI and the family are given an opportunity to discuss Olivia's development and needs with the school at length. And after the transition conference, the preschool transition coordinator shared the information gathered during the transition conference with the IEP team and preschool staff in preparation for eligibility determination. Next, the preschool transition coordinator arranged a day and time with the family to complete the eligibility evaluation for Olivia. Prior to the eligibility evaluation, the team had the opportunity to review the information that had been gathered from the EI, OT, PT, family, and preschool transition coordinator. They also completed an assessment of her developmental skills. At the end of the eligibility evaluation, Olivia and her family were given a tour of the school and preschool classrooms so that they would feel more comfortable with the environment and have an idea of what to expect if Olivia is determined eligible for preschool services. Olivia was determined to meet the criteria for having a disability and her disability affecting her learning. The family, EI, and IEP team were notified of the determination, and the IEP was scheduled for 2 weeks from the eligibility date to accommodate for IEP team members' schedule planning. The team met at the school and included the family, the administrator, one special education teacher that Olivia would be working with, one of the general education teachers that Olivia would be working with, and the preschool transition coordinator who participated in the eligibility. The family also invited Olivia's EI, who was able to join the team. During the meeting, each person shared their perception of Olivia's strengths, developmental needs, and other special factors, such as communication needs, assistive technology, and certain behaviors, hearing and vision, things like that, as well as the evaluation results. The team worked together to develop goals and supports for Olivia that satisfied both the educational and familial objectives. The entire team signed the IEP to express their agreement, and the school immediately went into arranging how those services and supports will be delivered for Olivia in order to have them in place prior to her turning 3. Olivia celebrates her 3rd birthday, and the first day of school has arrived. Her family has begun to build a rapport with the preschool staff, and they are beginning to feel more comfortable with the idea of Olivia going off to preschool. Olivia herself is ecstatic, as you can tell from the photo on the right. So she's super excited. Her day goes relatively smoothly, of course, with a few hiccups, like mom crying all the way down the hall after dropping her off. But she has a great day and adjusts well to her new environment. Olivia's teacher even gives mom a call halfway through to let her know how things are going. Her school career is off to a successful start. What I didn't share with y'all in the beginning is that many of the pieces of this story are actual events from my own family's experiences. So meet my daughter. This is Olivia. Let's talk about the 4 topic areas of the DEC recommended practices and how they apply to her story. The first one's leadership. So we see L6 is that leaders establish partnerships across levels, state to local, with their counterparts in other systems and agencies to create coordinated and inclusive systems of services and supports. Leaders promote, L13 is leaders promote efficient and coordinated service delivery for children and families by creating the conditions for practitioners from multiple disciplines and the family to work together as a team. So how do we see this brought to life in Olivia's story? You can put your answer in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, Carrie, our own Vanna, she will unmute you so that you can share.
That feels like a lot of pressure, but I'm going to try my best.
Okay. We appreciate it. Does anybody have anything they'd like to share? Okay, so we saw this, right? We saw this in how the 2 systems worked together and made it a smooth transition for the family, just by communicating and keeping in touch and keeping each other abreast of what was going on. There's very obviously coordinated service delivery. So they're working together with multiple disciplines and working with the family and valuing each member as part of the team. And that is created through the leadership role in the DEC recommended practices. So you can see kind of it's just good evidence-based practices. Let's look at another one. So there's assessment. So practitioners use a variety of methods, including observation and interviews to gather assessment information from multiple sources. We saw multiple sources, including the child's family and other significant individuals in the child's life. And we saw that here. Practitioners use clinical reasoning in addition to assessment results to identify the child's current levels of functioning and to determine the child's eligibility and plan for instruction. So they weren't just looking at what showed up on the assessment. They were taking the information that was gathered from the EI, that was gathered from the OT, the PT, what the family had to say, and putting that all together in addition to their assessment results to make a determination and to determine a plan. Then we have family. So practitioners building trusting and respectful partnerships with the family through interactions that are sensitive and responsive to cultural, linguistic, and socioeconomic diversity. You could really feel, I feel like in our story, that they did value what we had to say, what we had to share, what our concerns were about Olivia in her transition to school. And that shows. So that helped to build a trust and respect, and kind of a collaboration with family. The other thing that families always need to know, and this is a recommended practice, is help them understand their rights. You noticed a couple times in there that there was written prior notice. They received their procedural safeguards. So they were educated on what to expect and what they were entitled to based on IDEA. We know that family is an important part of the transition process. So we want to include them. And then finally, the obvious one, transition, right? So practitioners in sending and receiving programs exchange information before, during, and after transition about practices most likely to support the child's successful adjustment and positive outcomes. So they started early with Olivia, right? They, even prior to them meeting with the school, the EI was sharing information about Olivia and her strengths and her challenges with the preschool transition coordinator before. As the IEP process is playing out, eligibility is playing out. And then after, you see the parent or the teacher reaching out to the parent to let her know how it's going. Also, practitioners use a variety of planned and timely strategies with the child and family before, during, and after transition to support successful adjustment and positive outcomes for both the child and family. We see here that they were given an opportunity to tour the classroom, to meet the actual teachers that Olivia would be working with. And so that transition feels a little less stark. So in the beginning, I don't know if you remember the picture, the image of the guy leaping from one mountain to the next, and how terrifying that would be, because I don't do heights. But it goes a lot smoother and more successfully when we're transitioning like the leaf or like the butterfly, where it's just a smooth step-by-step process. So that is how transition DEC recommended practices could play a role in meeting this indicator. So let's test that knowledge a little bit. And since I can't seem to get my little things to pop up, Carrie's going to pop in the chat, menti.com, and then the code. And let's see if you guys can answer this question here. If you're not able to get the Menti to work, you can just put 1, 2, 3, or 4 in the chat. Oh, there we go. Wow, look at y'all. Yes. So practitioners use a variety of planned and timely strategies with the child and family before, during, and after the transition to support successful transition. So that's great. job. Okay, so we wanted to make sure that we had some resources for you all. I like this quote: one of the most important areas we can develop as professionals is competence in accessing and sharing knowledge. And so that's what the purpose of today is to share knowledge. We want you to have some resources. There's some great checklists here. There will be a link also put in the chat for this QR code. But you can use the QR code and just use your phone and scan it as well. I'll give you a minute to do that. Okay. Does anybody have any questions they would like to ask at this time? And while we're answering questions, you can use the second link in the chat to complete the webinar evaluation. It's our goal to provide engaging and effective training opportunities, so your feedback helps us to meet this goal. So if you can, please be sure to complete that. And you are welcome to ask any questions that you might have. I'm going to advance through our slides here just for some information, but if at some point you feel like you have a question that you'd like to bring to the table, please go ahead and do so. So this is our contact information. And you are welcome to reach out to us with any questions that you may have. And you may or may not have already heard about this, but SC Teams is something that Skippy is a part of. We are the TA Center or Technical Assistance Center for early childhood as part of SC Teams. And they will be hosting a summer university as kind of like an introduction to SC Teams. And this is the information for that. You can use this QR code as well. It'll be held July 10th through the 13th in Columbia, and it's free. And who doesn't love free? So take that opportunity to learn more from all of the SC Teams TA centers. And stay connected with us. So we are on all the social media now. And you can find our email address and you can subscribe to our newsletter. So our newsletter will have lots of information about what we have going on, things that are coming up, and some tips and tricks that you can use in the classroom or within your school. Thank you for joining us and getting up close and personal with Indicator 12.